Welcome to EoZ, where my opening credits did not work today, and where there is nobody watching me at this very moment, but hopefully people will come. Uh, this is a last minute episode at any rate. Today we're going to talk about olives. Hopefully you can hear me, but there's nobody here to tell me that. In the yesterday, I took the well, I can't say it was a waste because I got a lot of good material out of it, but I spent a bit of time looking at the Jews for Rashida virtual Passover. They had what they called a Seder. This is Jewish Voice for Peace Action. They put together something in which they did a normal, typical left-wing anti-Israel. It's a shame that you call this typical nowadays, but a regular anti-Israel Seder. And I made a lot of fun of it. I discussed it. As it was happening, I was tweeting about it. I tweeted a number of clips afterwards. I wrote a post about it today. So I'm not going to be going over that again. You could read my post. Maybe you'll enjoy it. But what I am going to talk about is one little part is no left-wing Seder is going to be complete without adding their own ingredients or their own symbols to the Seder plate. And of course, being that this is an anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian group, they're going to add an olive to their Seder plate. Here's their readings for their virtual Passover, quote, Haggadah, end quote. And of course they add an olive because an olive, and it's not just over here. When you look at newspaper articles, you'll see these, Palestinians are always with olive trees. You don't see the Spanish, you don't see the Greeks with olive trees, even though there are far more olives that are grown there. But you will see old Palestinian ladies, always old Palestinian ladies, with their olive trees. Either they're crying because some Jew was alleged to have cut it down. Very often the trees are just pruned, and then after they're pruned, people go and scream and say, "Oh, the Jews cut it down." But they Palestinians make a very big deal over their love of the land through olives. Olives is the symbol. Olives is everything to them. This is this is what proves that we've been here forever. It's because we've always had these olive trees. And there's surprisingly little pushback on that because it's like olives are such an inherent part of Jewish culture and Jewish culture in ancient Israel, and it's like nobody's really talking about that. If you, you can look through concordances and you can see that olives are mentioned and olive oil is mentioned throughout all of Tanakh, all of the Hebrew scripture. It is, it's all over the place. Olives are extremely important. Olives were used in the, in the tabernacle as well as in the, which is the Mishkan, in the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. It was used for sacrifices as a major ingredient in many sacrifices. It was used to anoint kings. Olives were all over the place. This is, olives are a huge, huge part of Judaism, let alone, ancient Israel. And I'm not an expert on olives. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on olives. But, reading article, I just did some quick research over here. And now clearly olive oil was not invented by the Jews. It was, and clearly, the Israeli, the Jews were not the first ones to cultivate olives in the land. But as far as making it into an industry, it sure looks like the Jews were the first ones to do it. It was, the earliest use of actually making it as an oil production comes out, they say, between the 9th and 7th centuries BCE is where it became a mass production industry in Israel, which is obviously, under the Jewish kingdoms. And and there was more in the Iron Age, and it was just like, this was clearly very, very tied to Jewish identity as well as Jewish culture as well as Jewish industry during this time, from between the time roughly of the 9th century BCE and on until the destruction of the Second Temple. But it was even during the First Temple period as well, there was some of it because obviously olive oil was out there, but I'm talking about just mass production. There's a site called BibleWalks.com, a Christian site, in which they go through all of the oil presses that they've seen going through. And I've never done this when I've been in Israel. I never went specifically out of my way to look for olive presses, but olive oil presses. But it's these guys have, and I recommend you look at this because they go through this. And now some of these things are reproductions of old ones. But if you just go through it and click on their links, the oldest ones that they mention are not, from the Arab period. There are plenty from the Byzantine times. There are plenty from the Roman times. But the oldest olive presses that are in the area of Israel are, from the times of the Jewish kingdoms. This one from Rosh Zayit is, which is in the Galilee. They don't have any pictures of the actual presses, unfortunately. They're showing here a yard that was a storage place for the olive oil. And it says around the structure were several oil press installations. And again, this was dated, they say, 8th century BCE. So that's, pretty long time ago over here. In Tel Hatzor, which is also in the Upper Galilee, there's, we have more pictures. Let's try to get down to it quick. There's, here, again, this is a reproduced one, but this is what the olive press looked like. I mean, it's in the original location, but this is using a different method than the other ones. There are a number of different methods, and again, if I was into olive oil, I'd be able to tell you more about them. About they even number them, the different types of presses that are out there. So this is one of the types of presses in which you put a weight over here and you squeeze the olives over here. But that's again in Tel Hatzor. In Har Gerizim, which is now known as a place where Samaritans are, but this is a little bit south of Shechem, which is Nablus, so it's in what's called the West Bank. Here you have like a beautiful installation of olive oil presses that you can see. And again, these are also, again, all of the ones I'm showing you are roughly 8th century BCE olive oil presses. And this predates, before even anyone ever heard the word Palestinian. And these are not Philistine ones either. These are the ones that are actually from the Jewish kingdom. I mean, there were some Canaanite, perhaps there might have been some that were over there. I don't see them. But these were all, the ones that are all listed over here in Bible Walks are all certainly from there. And there's also one over here, a place called Wineries Hill, which what they call a Type 4, as I told, there are different ones, a Type 4 olive press, also from roughly the same time period. And this is a different type in which they essentially dug a channel in the ground for it, and they would use this heavy piece of wood. Again, if I wish I knew more about olive oil, I'd love to tell you in the details how all of these things, but how all these things work. But nevertheless, it is just, there should be some pushback when the Palestinians have, again, they hijack everything that they can in order to be able to make their case. Because there is obviously, very little that could be called Palestinian culture. I've looked at that over the years. There's a couple of things you could look at. There's soap that specifically was made in Shechem and Nablus by Arabs, for the past couple hundred years. There are certain costumes that are famous around Bethlehem, but there's very little that you could actually call Palestinian culture. And of course, those are local. Those are examples of a local culture that happened to be in an area that was known as Palestine at certain times. There was nothing in common between the Palestinians as far as culture is concerned. And the same thing with olive oil. They're taking it retroactively and saying, oh, this is our culture, this is what we've been doing, this is our contribution, and this is why we're so tied to the land. Here's another example. This is a bit later, and this is only last year. This is a 2,000-year-old Jewish neighborhood that was found in Jerusalem itself. And they found inside it was a family, a Jewish family with a burial mansion, but it had an olive press as well. They must have been fairly rich because they had their own mikveh, their own ritual bath, in this neighborhood, or in this house. It looked like, so this is all there, and this is all, you can see it today, and that's what's remarkable about the Palestinians. Talk about their ties to the land and how ancient they are and how they've been there forever and they've been hugging these trees. But you can visit Israel today and you can see all of these things that I'm showing you over here. And I encourage you to, as soon as we can get back on airplanes, because if you want to talk about olives or an olive oil in the Middle East, and it's impossible to talk about it without discussing Jews, without discussing what happens in the Torah and the Bible. As I said, it was like it's an essential part of Judaism, of the kingdoms, of kingship. It was olive oil. There are analogies to olives and olive oil that are throughout the Bible, throughout the Torah. It's you can't escape it, and it's really it's a chutzpahdik, so to speak, to say that the Palestinians go and say, hey, we're the ones that are the owners of the olive culture, and it's actually way past time for the Jews to be able to come back and to reclaim our part of this of the true ancient olive oil culture, especially the culture of industrialized olive oil, which was clearly introduced in the region by the Jews at the time. Again, the Romans certainly had it, and I'm not saying it was only but the Jews, but I'm just saying in the region, in the time, it wasn't the Canaanites, it wasn't the Hittites, it wasn't the Jebusites, it was clearly the Israelites and the Jews that were doing this. As I mentioned, this is going to be a short talk today because I don't have too much else to say, and as I said, I'm not an expert in this sort of thing, but I thought it was important to at least get this out, to talk about it. Chag Kasher V'Sameach, for those that are celebrating Passover, Pesach. The last days are coming up, and I will be off for those couple of days, but nevertheless, it's fun. I'm enjoying doing these videos, and we'll see how long I can keep doing them, whether I'll keep doing them after this pandemic is over, or whether I'll just do it for the duration. We'll find out. But nevertheless, thanks a lot for those that are visiting. Thanks for those that are watching right now, and they're going to be watching it tomorrow. And I wish you all a very happy holiday, and thanks again for visiting.